At the Winter Hearts Gala, an event known more for its glittering formality than musical interludes, an unexpected moment unfolded that would ripple far beyond the confines of the ballroom. Karoline Leavitt, widely recognized for her firm stance and commanding presence in the political arena, found herself in an unfamiliar spotlight. As conversations echoed around the chandeliers and the mood leaned into playful banter, someone jokingly suggested she step up to the grand piano. The suggestion, tinged with disbelief and amusement, was not one rooted in genuine expectation, but in casual mockery, a challenge thrown without anticipation of acceptance. What followed was a study in composure, courage, and unspoken defiance. She accepted the challenge without hesitation, crossing the floor with a calm certainty that immediately silenced the murmurs. As she seated herself at the piano, the room quieted, more out of curiosity than reverence. There was no sheet music, no warm-up, no nervous laughter, just a young woman in an elegant evening gown preparing to place her hands on the keys of a Steinway grand. Then it began. The first notes of Rachmaninoff's prelude in C-sharp minor emerged from the instrument with deliberate power, rich, brooding, full of tension. Her fingers moved with a precision and sensitivity that spoke of years of disciplined training. It was clear within seconds that this was not a gimmick. This was not a party trick or a rehearsed routine trotted out for polite applause. This was a performance rooted in muscle memory and soul. Each chord, each dramatic pause, and each cascade of arpeggios displayed a fluency with the language of classical music that one does not fake. As the piece unfurled, the audience underwent a remarkable transformation. The initial expressions of amusement melted into stunned focus. Eyes widened. Mouths fell slightly open. Phones, which had been lifted in jest to capture what they expected would be an awkward or amateurish moment, remained suspended, recording something far more profound than anticipated. The weight of the piece, its melancholy, its thunderous middle section, its ethereal resolution, hung in the air with gravity. In that moment, she was not a political figure trying to prove a point. She was an artist, channeling the ghost of Rachmaninoff with uncanny poise. When the final chord was struck and her hands fell still, a long, almost sacred silence followed. It was the kind of pause that acknowledges awe, not the beat before applause, but the breath taken when something genuine has occurred. Then, like a wave rushing back, the room erupted in a standing ovation. Not out of politeness, not out of obligation, but from the shock of being caught so completely off guard by excellence where none had been expected. She stood, nodded quietly, and returned to her table as the applause continued, a half smile on her face, revealing little but letting everything hang in the silence she left behind. What made the moment extraordinary wasn't merely technical skill, though that was undeniable. It was the grace with which she shifted the energy of the room. She didn't announce what she was about to play. She didn't offer a disclaimer or ask for leniency. She didn't explain where she had studied or how long she had practiced. She let the music speak, and in doing so, she rewrote the expectations of every person in that room. This spontaneous performance transcended categories of profession, of gender, of public persona. It reminded those in attendance, and later those watching online, that talent is not confined to roles we assign people. The fact that the gesture began as a joke only made the transformation more poignant. She was meant to be humored, possibly even humiliated. Instead, she delivered something beautiful, startling, and true. For many, the takeaway lingered long after the notes had faded. It was not about proving someone wrong, but about revealing something hidden and powerful. Her performance offered a rare moment where authenticity and skill broke through the static of expectations. In the soft hush that followed the applause, people didn't just see her differently. They reconsidered how often they judge anyone's depth based on surface impressions, and all of that was accomplished without a single word. Karoline Leavitt's unexpected piano performance at the Winter Hearts Gala did more than entertain. It cracked open a carefully constructed image of a young political figure and replaced it with a far more nuanced portrait. In that moment, As she sat at the keys of a grand piano and played a complex classical composition with emotion and control, she did something rare. She dismantled a stereotype in real time. The performance was not anticipated, nor was it introduced with fanfare. It simply happened, and in doing so, it forced everyone watching to confront their assumptions. Prior to that moment, her public identity had been largely defined by firm rhetoric, policy debates, and her unapologetic presence on national platforms. To many, she was a symbol of youthful confidence in a political context, someone with sharpened language and unwavering opinions. And as is often the case with public figures, especially those in politics, people began to flatten her identity into a single dimension, a type rather than a whole person. This flattening is subtle but pervasive. It turns complex individuals into figures that are easier to praise, criticize, or dismiss. For Karoline, this meant being seen only through the lens of her political alignment, her media soundbites, and the calculated stagecraft of campaigns. So when she rose from her table and calmly walked to the piano, few in the room imagined what would follow. Some may have expected a few clumsy bars or a self-deprecating joke. Instead, what emerged was a commanding rendition of a deeply emotional classical piece, played with accuracy, depth, and a clear understanding of its mood. Her fingers were assured. Her timing was thoughtful. The dynamics of the piece were fully realized, ranging from soft tension to powerful crescendos. It was not the playing of someone dabbling or performing for novelty. It was the performance of someone who had spent years cultivating a skill, alone and away from the spotlight, with no need for validation. The room responded not just with applause, but with awe, because they had just seen something that challenged what they thought they knew. This wasn't a carefully rehearsed PR stunt, nor was it some staged pivot to soften her image. It felt spontaneous and authentic, which made it all the more impactful. In a culture where public personas are tightly managed, the rawness of her musical expression stood in contrast to the curated optics of the event. She wasn't seeking approval. She wasn't trying to persuade. She was simply sharing a part of herself that didn't fit neatly into the narrative others had written for her. What this performance revealed, and what lingered in the minds of many who watched, was that identity is never singular. A person can be fiercely political and artistically expressive. A woman can be unapologetically assertive in public discourse and still possess a deeply private, refined talent. These things do not cancel each other out. In fact, they enhance one another. Her ability to communicate through music without saying a word added new depth to the understanding of who she is. It disrupted the binary thinking that so often defines public life, either intellectual or creative, either strong or graceful, either serious or soulful. The stereotype she broke that night was not just about politicians. It was about anyone who has ever been boxed in by their job, their affiliations, or their outward demeanor. Her performance reminded the audience that talent is not always visible, that excellence often develops quietly, away from scrutiny, and that people are almost always more than what they present in public. This wasn't about rebranding or changing perceptions for political gain. It was about revealing a truth that had never been hidden, just overlooked, because no one thought to look for it. And that's what made the moment powerful. It didn't come from a desire to impress, but from a willingness to be whole, even when only parts of her were ever seen. As the final notes faded into the room in silence, followed before the applause, something fundamental shifted. The audience wasn't just responding to the music. They were responding to the fact that their expectations had been completely dismantled. They had seen someone they thought they knew reveal a part of themselves they hadn't imagined, and, in doing so, had to reconsider how they had come to their assumptions in the first place. The moment Karoline Leavitt's hands touched the keys of the grand piano, the trajectory of the evening shifted, and so did her digital footprint. What began as a light-hearted or even dismissive challenge in a ballroom quickly became a viral sensation, capturing the attention of people far beyond the confines of the event itself. The video footage, initially taken by attendees who expected something amusing or unexpected, was soon circulating online. It wasn't the kind of video typically associated with public figures. There was no press conference, no political rally, no calculated statement. Instead, there was silence, music, and surprise. And in the digital age, those three elements can combine to create a perfect storm of attention. Social media platforms, known for their relentless pace and fleeting trends, suddenly found a new focal point. The clip, just a few minutes long, showed her seated calmly, her fingers poised with confidence, then gliding across the keys in a performance that conveyed both technical precision and emotional depth. Within hours, it had been shared thousands of times, spreading from private group chats to mainstream platforms. Comments poured in from people across the political spectrum, not to debate policy or ideology, but to express disbelief and admiration. Many admitted they had not expected such a performance, not because it was unusual for someone to play piano well, but because it challenged the expectations they had unknowingly formed about her. The virality wasn't accidental. It happened because the video tapped into something rare, the unexpected display of talent from someone known for something entirely different. In a digital environment saturated with content, it's the unexpected moments, the ones that defy typecasting, that spark genuine engagement. People weren't just watching the performance, they were watching their assumptions be quietly, gracefully dismantled. The contrast between her public role and her private skill created a tension that made the video endlessly rewatchable, shareable, and comment-worthy. Major media pages soon picked up the story, framing it as a hidden talent reveal and a surprising shift in the way people viewed a young political figure. Articles were written not only about the performance itself, but also about the reactions to it. The headlines varied. Some focused on the music, others on the cultural implications of public figures showing vulnerability or unexpected range. What remained consistent was the tone of astonishment, the collective acknowledgement that the public had seen a new facet of someone they thought they already understood. For many, the performance and the online response that followed became a talking point, not just about her, but about the nature of identity and perception in the age of social media. In a world where public personas are curated and edited, authenticity, especially when captured accidentally or spontaneously, becomes all the more valuable. People crave moments that feel real, unrehearsed and unfiltered. Her performance offered that in a pure form. It wasn't pre-announced. It wasn't posted by a campaign team. It was filmed by someone at the event, shared organically, and carried forward by genuine interest. As more versions of the video emerged, different angles, varying sound qualities, snippets paired with analysis or commentary, the story evolved into something larger. Fans of classical music began discussing the piece she played. Pianists weighed in on the complexity of the composition. Others reflected on the discipline required to perform such a work flawlessly in a public setting, especially under the scrutiny of an audience expecting something else entirely. Musicians and artists, often sidelined in political discourse, chimed in to express solidarity and appreciation for the moment of pure expression. What struck many was that she never attempted to capitalize on the moment. She did not rush to claim the narrative or explain the context. She didn't follow the performance with a viral speech or a promotional video. She let the music stand for itself. In doing so, she allowed the story to breathe and evolve without overt interference. That choice only deepened the respect from many viewers. It suggested confidence, authenticity, and a level of emotional intelligence not often associated with the fast response nature of modern public life. The viral moment was more than a showcase of talent. It was a rare window into something unguarded. It prompted viewers to ask how often we overlook the depths of others, how easily we place people into narrow roles, and how much more we might discover if we allowed space for complexity. In just a few minutes of music, recorded on a phone and shared across networks, she redefined the tone of a public conversation, not by what she said, but by what she showed. In a world where public figures are constantly expected to explain themselves, to narrate their actions, and to respond swiftly to every moment of visibility, Karoline Leavitt made a different choice. After her unanticipated piano performance, at the Winter Hearts Gala, a performance that immediately captivated the room and later the internet, She chose silence. She did not take to the microphone to elaborate on her background with music. She did not issue a press release. She did not follow up with a polished social media video or an attempt to steer the narrative. She simply walked back to her table, as the applause echoed around her, letting the performance exist as it was, raw, complete, and sufficient. There was something unusually powerful in that decision. In a culture addicted to commentary and explanation, choosing not to speak can be an act of remarkable confidence. Her restraint allowed the moment to retain its purity. The audience was not led into an interpretation. They were not given a set of talking points or guided through a curated version of what they had witnessed. Instead, they were left to sit with the experience and to feel it, to reflect on it, to consider the ways in which their perceptions had been challenged. That kind of unstructured, authentic impact is increasingly rare in public life, and perhaps that is why it resonated so deeply. Music, especially when performed with both technical skill and emotional honesty, has a unique ability to bypass intellectual filters. It moves people in ways that words often cannot. Her rendition of Rachmaninoff's Prelude in C-sharp minor was more than a display of talent. It was a form of communication. It conveyed something private, something cultivated in silence and discipline. It offered vulnerability, not in a dramatic or performative sense, but in the quiet power of someone revealing a part of themselves that had never been on display. And then, once that part was shared, she allowed it to stand on its own, without justification, without amplification. This kind of expression contrasts sharply with the nature of most public performances. So often, they are followed by attempts to frame, to spin, to align with broader messaging goals. Instead, what she did was allow art to remain art. She gave the audience, both present and later online, the space to form their own conclusions. And perhaps most significantly, she allowed her identity to be expanded not through language, but through action. She didn't ask to be seen differently. She simply was different, in plain view, for anyone who cared to notice. This decision had a magnifying effect on the impact of the performance. Without commentary diluting or shaping the reception, the story spread organically. People who saw the video were left to interpret it on their own terms. Some saw it as an example of hidden depth. Others saw it as a moment of poetic irony. Still others were moved by the emotional resonance of the piece itself, irrespective of who was playing it. Each person brought their own context to what they had witnessed, and in doing so, the moment became something far more dynamic than a conventional public gesture. Even after the performance had gone viral, she remained notably silent about it. There was no sudden pivot to discuss her musical past or to incorporate it into her public image. She did not seek out opportunities to recreate the moment for the cameras or to offer behind-the-scenes stories. This absence of follow-up only deepened the mystique. It left space for speculation, but also for admiration. In a time when so much of public life is overly exposed, overly explained, and overproduced, her silence felt like a form of grace. It was an acknowledgement that not every moment needs to be controlled, that some things are more powerful when left to stand unaccompanied. Silence in this context did not signify detachment. It signaled trust in the audience, in the moment, and in the music. It suggested a belief that not everything meaningful needs to be marketed or explained. Sometimes what is most resonant is not what is said, but what is felt and remembered. Her silence preserved the integrity of that memory. It turned what could have been a fleeting novelty into something timeless and quietly profound. And in doing so, it redefined what it means to make a statement. Karoline Leavitt's performance at the Winter Hearts Gala did more than captivate a room. It stirred a much broader conversation about identity, talent, and the power of unexpected moments. In a world increasingly shaped by predictability and instant judgment, her ability to upend expectations without a single word was extraordinary. This was not a carefully planned campaign move or a publicity stunt designed to soften an image. It was an unfiltered glimpse into another layer of who she is, a layer cultivated not for applause, but for personal fulfillment, discipline, and perhaps love for an art that demands solitude and patience. What made the moment so impactful was not only her technical mastery, but also the context in which it occurred. She had nothing to prove that night. There was no indication that she was planning to perform, no prelude to prepare the audience. Her decision to step forward, sit down, and play a difficult and emotionally intense piece of classical music, one that requires not just talent but vulnerability, was bold, especially in front of a crowd not primed for such a shift. It turned a seemingly light-hearted suggestion into a moment of true transformation, not just for her, but for those watching. The broader public response, from viral videos to commentary from musicians, cultural critics, and everyday viewers, affirmed the deep human hunger for authenticity. It wasn't just the music people reacted to, but the sincerity behind it. In a society that prizes control over perception, where moments are curated and edited for maximum effect, she did something that felt entirely unrehearsed, and it landed with unmistakable power. Perhaps most remarkable was her silence in the Zeit's aftermath. She didn't seek to guide the narrative or capitalize on the attention. She didn't issue statements, retell the story, or follow it with a polished media strategy. By stepping back, she allowed people to sit with their own interpretations, to think more deeply about what they had seen and how it challenged their assumptions. That silence underscored the strength of the moment itself. It needed no explanation, no defense, no amplification. In doing so, Karoline Leavitt reminded us that people are more than the sum of their public personas. Talents and passions, cultivated in private, can be just as defining, if not more so, than those on display in the professional realm. And when revealed at the right time, in the right way, they have the power to surprise, to soften, to inspire, and most of all, to shift perception. This performance, brief as it was, will likely remain a reference point not just for her public image, but for the broader understanding of how authenticity and grace can create lasting impact. It proved that sometimes the most powerful statement is made not with a microphone, but with music,